And then I was in this kind of creative writing intensive my senior year where they brought in different people from the publishing field. And I think it was like 11 p.m. the night before the deadline, I applied to an internship at Inkwell Management, which was an agency. And I worked there for a while, and then I got a job working at an entertainment agency on the book side. So doing kind of like a lot of celebrity memoir, stuff like that. It was just like a very intense environment that wasn't really for me. And then I moved to Random House in 2019. Kind of thought that I maybe wanted to do editorial, but there was an opening in marketing. And I thought, okay, maybe I'll start in marketing and move to editorial, which a lot of people do. And then I just really fell in love with it and was like, no, I'm staying here. It's just like a lot of creative thinking, which I really like. You do a lot of writing, a lot of like creating book club kits, social media, stuff like that. Basically, you start out talking to the author and agent, getting a feel for what the book is about and who the audience is, and really determining that. And then we work with our ad ops team and our designers to run advertising campaigns and create social assets. So basically, it's about knowing who the reader is for each book and figuring out how to reach them.
That makes a lot of sense, and is such important work to kind of frame a book to have it find its best home. So that's wonderful. Thank you. Okay, and we're going to move right along to Christine Johnston. Is a publicist at Crown, an imprint of Random House, where she works on a mix of fiction and nonfiction. Before starting her career in publishing, she graduated from the College of William and Mary with a BA in psychology, and then enrolled in the Columbia publishing course. So I think kind of the same question for you. How did you get here, and what are you up to?
Yeah, so a little bit of it was in my bio, but I think the Columbia publishing course was a really great segue into the industry. I will say, going into it, kind of like Madison said, I was pretty fixated on an editorial career path, which I think is the most visible career path to people outside of publishing. Like, I just had it in my mind, I wanted to be a book editor. And the great thing about a course like the Columbia course, even though they're totally not necessary to like gain entry into the industry, is that it helped me kind of figure out what I was better suited for, which was ultimately publicity. And you get to try a little bit of different aspects of publishing. So you work a little with like marketing people, and they bring in professionals from the actual publishing industry to work with you and give you an idea of like what they actually do day to day. And it was really that experience that taught me. I love working super closely with authors. I love championing their work. I like working super closely with marketing, like kind of what Madison was saying about finding a home for a book. In the marketing purview, you kind of supplement that with publicity. Like, I like finding the right outlets to cover authors, figuring out like where readers are really learning about the next type of book that they want to read. And it's just fun. Like, I feel like you work so closely with different people in the media and like form certain relationships, and everyone's just like in love with books and trying to champion books in the best way. So yeah, that's kind of, and then right from the Columbia publishing course, I started as a publicity assistant. And I've been there for the past 4 years working on a pretty diverse list of books, that was probably one of the things that surprised me the most about working in publishing. Like, I think I thought you'd be super siloed into like commercial fiction or like only nonfiction. But I feel like most people on our publicity team get to work on a little bit of like everything that they are interested in. So yeah, I love working at Random House.
Especially Crown. I feel like you all have such a diverse list too. Yeah, that's great. Okay, thank you so much. Wonderful. Okay, so Melissa Sanford is a publicist for the Random House Group imprint of Penguin Random House, where she works on books in all genres. She graduated from the University of Virginia with a BA in English and Religious Studies, and currently lives in New York City. So welcome, Melissa.
Hello. So I guess how I got into publishing, like everybody, I wanted to be an editor, which I think is just a product of not really knowing what other jobs were available in the publishing industry, but knowing I really loved books, knowing I wanted to talk about books for a living, and, you know, not knowing anything else. So editor was what I had my mindset on, but I started to do a ton of informational interviews. I basically reached out, I like stalked people on LinkedIn and friends of friends, and through our alumni like database, I reached out to pretty much anybody who had even a slight relation to publishing, and asked them if they would mind answering a few questions. Most people ignored me, but a few people didn't. And it just honestly happened to be right place, right time. I was talking to somebody who happened to know of an opening, and they were able to help me make those connections. And I got an interview, and the rest is history. And that just happened to be in the publicity department, but it really was kind of a happy circumstance, because I think publicity is much more suited to my personality, what I like to do, and my strengths. It's very public facing, it's very outgoing, you get to make a lot of cool connections, meet a lot of cool people. Kind of like what Christine was saying, like publicists wear a lot of different hats, you do a lot of different things. You work with authors and agents on press materials and pitching and talking to media contacts about, you know, please review this book I'm working on, or set up an interview with my author. We're also in charge of setting up author events, both in person when that was a thing we were allowed to do, and virtually since the pandemic has started. So if you've ever been to an author talk, you likely have a book publicist to thank for that. And it's really fun. I mean, we do work really closely with all sorts of other departments. So marketing, probably most of all, but editorial as well, our sales team. It's really collaborative, which I think is a really fun aspect of it, is you just get to work with a lot of really cool, interesting people.
Yeah, that's a really helpful framing, and definitely true indeed. Like, all authors events are brought to you by publicists. So thank you so much to all of you all folks. Okay, cool. I want to circle back to so many things that you all have said so far, but definitely want to get to Colleen and Aparna. So Colleen Nuccio, I believe, is a marketing manager at Random House, where she works mainly on commercial fiction titles, including Lilac Girls, Before We Were Yours, and The New Girl. Her one true love is connecting with book club readers, and part of her job at Random House is running Random House Book Club, their consumer-facing book club program. In her spare time, you can find her binging HGTV and running around the park with her puppy, Shep. Well, hopefully they'll make an appearance. But welcome, Colleen.
I had to make sure Shep was not in the room for this, because he's not always respectful of other people's time. So he will not be making an appearance today, but I'm sure if you're on any other Zoom with me any other time, you have heard him in the background. So I kind of got into publishing, I guess, more like Melissa than like Madison and Christine. It was a lot less intentional for me. I had a psychology and sociology major in college, and I totally expected to be like open my own practice. I wanted to focus on PTSD, very different than what I'm doing now. And just kind of realized after graduating and actually starting my career that that was not the right career for me. So I had to halt and do an about face. I think I just kind of took stock and realized that like the one thing that I loved in this life more than anything was books and reading, and wanted to be a part of that world. I will say, like everyone else here, I was like, oh, I'm going to be an editor. That's like my career path. That's my journey. And quickly realized that was not the right place for me. I would never be good at that. But I was really lucky that I had a friend who was already in the industry. She was in sales, and she was like, no, that's really not for you. You should consider all of these other options. She also happened to be friends with my boss, well, my old boss, who helped hire me. So it was exactly like Melissa, like right place, right time. And I actually started off in children's books, so very different than what I'm currently doing. And there it was kind of interesting because I was working on brand there, as I really focus on now, but it's so different when you're working on like the Seuss estate and Disney and Nick, where there's not, you know, a front-facing person, you're not working directly with an author. And well, I absolutely loved that time, and I felt like I got to be so creative, and it was so much fun to do these like kits for kids and look at all that kind of thing. I really wanted to try more author focused things, more actually like talking to the consumer, where in children's you can't talk to the consumer because it's age gated. So it was really great to move to BBD and kind of work on that new world. I will say, I think in our world, as much as I love the creative part of it, I spend a lot of time actually using my psychology degree and holding people's hands and like listening to them, because I think marketing is kind of that connector between every department. We talk to design and copy and everybody, and it's kind of getting all those ideas in one place and making the campaign move forward. Besides the fact that, I mean, you're talking to your authors all the time, and that is a lot of hand holding, which I love, but I think that's a really big part of our job, is kind of that listening to other people and connecting and making sure that you're making the right move for everyone and bringing all those ideas together to one place.
Awesome. I apologize if my internet is a little bit unstable. I may also type just in case, but I wanted to say thank you to all from the author side for all the hand holding that all of you all do. Extremely appreciated. Fantastic. Okay. And last and very not least, we have Aparna Rishi as Assistant Director, Consumer Engagement at Random House, which she says is a complicated way of saying I manage our email and web platforms. Simply put, I work on connecting our reader with the right books. If you like historical fiction, mystery and suspense, literary fiction, or any number of genres, I try to provide our subscribers with content they will like. This comes in the form of email newsletter you can subscribe to, or a web page or site you may visit. Not surprisingly, she loves to read and lately have gotten into the habit of reading and listening to 2 different books at the same time to beat her last year's reading goal. Very admirable. Welcome, Aparna.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, so my journey is sort of similar in some instances and very different. I studied media studies in college because I knew I actually wanted to do ads. I wanted to work on, ad campaigns, like not print or sort of on TV and stuff. But I realized like that's maybe not quite where I want to live and breathe my time, but I still wanted to be involved with the arts in some way. And I just I'm also fairly nerdy. So I actually used to work at an academic press before, which I used to love. I was very proud and, to see sort of like very lofty books that I would kind of get to bring home every now and then. And I would try my hand. I never got a master's, which I always wanted to do, but that was kind of one way of like, let me dig into something. But I moved over to trade publishing at Penguin Random House a couple of years ago. And I love doing that. I actually read a lot more now than I did when I was in academic press. Yeah, it was just kind of a nice coincidence to be able to land in a publishing industry. The job I got at the academic, that was my first publishing industry experience. I didn't actually know anyone. I just applied and was able to get an interview. What is sort of interesting about my job is that I work with a lot of marketing, but it's very sort of left and right brained. It's very creative in how I'm going to reach my reader, or what different thing that can I do this time than what I did the last time to reach them. But it's also very, very analytical. It's very data heavy. We try to make decisions based on what we see are market trends, what we see are trends that we're seeing in our sort of performance of our newsletters, or maybe which website, what type of website are people clicking on? What type of information are they clicking on more in a newsletter, which means that maybe that's what they want to hear more of, or if we tried something that they didn't get as many views on, well, we clearly know that's not kind of the answer, or maybe we can try something else. So it's a lot of trial and error. It's a lot of testing. It's a lot of relying on data. And at the end of the day, I get to read lots of books. I never get to interact with authors, only in like very, very small instances, but I cherish those. But I get to work with marketing. I work with Colleen and Madison all the time.
That's really helpful, though I think there's many things that outside folks, including writers and authors, don't understand about the many aspects of what you all do. So it's cool to have that variety. Delightful. Okay, so yeah, indeed, audience members, start to get any questions you might have specifically on anything that folks have said so far, and feel free to put them in the Q&A. But I'm going to ask a couple more questions aimed at all of you. So whoever feels like they want to jump in, please do. And I guess I just wanted to start a little bit. I think some folks mentioned like making informational, like networking coffee dates, and some folks mentioned like the Columbia publishing course, like for folks that are, you know, curious about this work but don't have a lot of experience, like what do you see being the most useful ways to learn more about this field and potentially get into it?
Honestly, you should just message people on LinkedIn. I get like maybe one every month or so, and I always respond. And I always think to myself, wow, I wish I would have done this, because I don't know, like it feels like, oh my God, this person is being brave enough to reach out to me. Like I always will take whatever phone call, especially I get a lot of people from like the Michigan Alumni Network. Like if you have someone and you see that they went to your school or that you have a mutual connection, I mean, the worst they can do is just not respond.
Yeah, I totally echo that. I mean, it was part of what I said, but I got my job through networking. That's what I always tell people. Like, that's my number one piece of advice for people who want to get into the industry. Even just to learn more about it. Like I said, I only knew about editorial before I started doing these phone calls, and talking to people in all sorts of different departments helped kind of solidify what I was actually interested in, and was able to kind of move forward with more of like a game plan in mind. And I also get messages on LinkedIn all the time. I try to respond to as many as I possibly can. Again, a lot of people are going to ignore you, but a lot of people won't. And there's a lot of people that are interested in helping answer questions, you know, kind of help you get a foot in the door. And I think that that's really important for learning and also in starting your career in publishing.
Yeah, I think I'll also say, like, it's an incredibly small industry. You'll hear probably everyone on this panel say, like, if they don't know someone directly, they know someone who knows someone. Like, there's just no hiding in publishing. So even if you meet someone and talk to them and they're in editorial and you're looking for publicity, they probably know somebody who knows somebody that has a position open and is looking. I think it's like the best way that you can possibly get your foot in the door is just by starting to talk to people, because it's a small community and we all talk all the time.
And I would just add to that, when I was applying for publishing jobs, I feel like I was really fixated on working on the type of books that I like to read, which is literary fiction. And I don't work mainly on literary fiction now, and I'm so happy about it. Not that I don't love it, but I think my advice would be like to keep a pretty open mind about the type of imprint you're going to be working for. Like if you know you don't love like commercial romance novels, then maybe don't apply to an imprint that only publishes those. But so many imprints publish such diverse works. And I feel like even if you're working on a type of book that you wouldn't pick up in your spare time, you can learn so much. You can get a foot in the door in the industry. And kind of like Colleen said, everyone talks, so you could end up somewhere that is more aligned with what you're interested in. So I would just say, don't be super picky, but you can still be strategic.
Yeah, same here. I mean, I echoing everybody, like, you know, if you like an industry, find it on LinkedIn, find people who work in it, contact them. Most of the time, people are pretty nice. I've done that also. A lot of students sometimes will email me from my alumni network. I always try to answer and be as transparent as possible on whatever insight I can give them. And same thing, don't be picky. There are so many things that I have learned that I didn't even know existed before. Or that I knew sort of, you know, about them, I knew of them, but I really learned, like my job right now is super data heavy. I did not start out being very data oriented before. I knew that I should be, and that's just something that you learn over time and you pick up, and it's knowledge gathered over years, or just watching what's happening in the world. How did this person do it? Informational interviews, all the way.
Totally. Yeah, I think when I was like a wee baby writer and I was like, you know, what is networking? I feel like I kept it sounded really scary, networking. It's like you go and you drink weird stuff and you say awkward things and it's awful, but no, it's basically just like asking people how they got where they got and what wisdom might they be able to offer you. And as you all said, I think people are surprisingly generous. So that's really delightful to hear. I think I'm also curious, like, what do you all think are some of the biggest like misconceptions from the outside about what publicity and marketing folks do? Perhaps being someone who was outside of the industry yourself once and now that you're in, like, what do you all do that people don't know you do, I guess?
I think from the marketing side, the one thing like I always thought, and I don't know why I thought this, was like if you were marketing at a company, you maybe because I didn't understand like the whole publishing industry, but I was like, oh, you're marketing like Penguin Random House. Like I didn't understand that I was doing individual title work all the time and how really like intricate it is and how much it changes from title to title and how like in depth you get with the author and the book, and it becomes like somehow you feel like you're the one who published the book at the end of it, and you have to remember like, no, this actually isn't my work, like somebody else wrote this. But I think that was kind of my big misconception, was like how specialized you get and how different it is from book to book. Also like how many books you publish at once. Like you're going to have 26 books on your list, or if you're at a different imprint, you could be working at like one at a time and really zoned into that one book. So I think that also changes so much from place to place.
I feel like when I thought about marketing, I pictured like someone in a suit with a business degree, and like it's much more creative than I think a lot of people understand. There's a lot of collaboration with editorial as well. Like you do get to talk a lot about the books. I mean, it really is, if you're passionate about reading, it's not, you don't have to like know as much about the data and the advertising side of it, because you'll learn that on the job.
Yeah, I didn't even know publicity was a thing that existed in the publishing world. I thought that authors wrote books and they were published, and then if it was good, the New York Times would write a review about it. And that's obviously not how it goes. There are hundreds and hundreds of books published each year, each month, and it's so different than I thought. Like you just have to spend a lot of time thinking about messaging and making those contacts with the media and building up relationships so that they trust you and they pick up your book. And I just didn't even realize that that was how it worked. So the fact that publishing like had a publicity department was a shock to me.
Same thing about sort of my job. I don't work directly on books. I don't work in publicity. I don't work in editorial. It's a very sort of concentrated job. So I don't, maybe that's not something that people realize, that you don't necessarily have to work on a particular book to be in marketing or to be in publishing. I work across imprints. I work, and I mainly work on email and web. That is also a function of our division sort of is structured that way. Not everybody does it that way. Sometimes a title marketer would be the one working on external communication through web and email. How we are structured is that we have a job, and there are several people in my team who work on that. So the fact that it even exists and it is sort of its own structural thing with its own expertise that you kind of build over time. So I didn't know earlier that that could be a thing.
And I'll just add one last thing, not to echo what everyone else has said, but something that really surprised me about working in publicity, and I feel like marketing would say the same thing, is how much care and attention individual authors need. And I mean that in like a really positive way. Like you're their person who is making them feel less anxious about a process that they may or not be super familiar with. Like if it's a debut novelist, you're the one who's explaining to them why you're like pursuing certain outlets and why you're not pursuing other outlets. And book publicity can be kind of unpredictable. Sometimes you don't get the answers that you want to get. And that has been one of the most rewarding parts of the job for me, is like building these relationships with authors, especially as you've like worked with the same ones on like their first and second and third book, and over time see how like that relationship evolves. because I had just never thought like, oh, like if you're publishing a book, you're probably going to be pretty anxious about it, which is obvious now, but like I didn't really learn that until I was on the job seeing an author acting super nervous about it.
I will say to Christine's point too, I think one of the biggest things I remind myself of all the time is that it doesn't matter what book number it is for that author. They've spent days, hours, months, years working to put this out into the world. And now there are people that can just review it online and say whatever they want, and there's no control. And it's just like realizing that while you may have seen this process 8,000 times, and maybe they even went through the process 5 times because they have 5 other books, it's different and hard for them every time. And you're the person that they're going to talk to about it. And you just have to remember, like, you're not putting yourself out there. They did it, and try to like be there for them the best you can.
Yes, as an author that has experienced the devastating anxiety of my first book, I look forward to feeling that again with my second and future books. Fantastic. Okay, yes, folks, do go ahead and put some additional questions here in the Q&A. We already have one great one, which I was also wondering, we touched on it a little bit, but indeed, because of the pandemic and because of an increasing an important demand for more diverse books, like it seems that things are opening up a little bit in the publishing industry in terms of hiring and potentially hiring folks from outside of New York City. So how do you all see that? I think this is the spirit of the question. Yes. How do you all see that like happening yet? And are you hopeful that things will keep going in that direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're all still working from home right now. We have no real plans to return to the office anytime soon. And I think that it's been made very clear from our CEO and from our directors and people like that, that remote flexible work is the way of the future. And it's really important so that we can expand our ranks a little bit. Living in New York is expensive. It's not plausible for everybody, especially on a publishing salary. And I think that the importance of, you know, having people work remotely has only grown over the last year or so, especially now that we proved that it's possible. Like we've all been doing this for almost a year and it's totally doable. So I do think that that trend is definitely going to grow.
Yeah, I think also, like most communities this year, or I guess last year, a lot of things were rocked. And I think there was a real come to Jesus moment in the publishing community about how gatekept it is and how white it is. And I think this is kind of pushed us forward in a way that I'm not sure we would have been able to do as quickly or as well otherwise. I really do think we'll continue to have a very flexible working situation. Honestly, people have moved away from New York. I don't think some of them are moving back and they don't plan to quit. So I think kind of as Melissa said, like we've seen that it's working. There's no reason to go back. And I do think it offers opportunities that never would have been available before. So I see this as a really positive, big change for the community in general.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a helpful point. Yeah, people have moved away and don't want to come back. So going with that, it's possible that people can move in that are not literally moving to New York. Fantastic. And much of this is still to be seen, I'm sure. So I appreciate all those thoughts. Okay, here's a very helpful question that actually it seems like 2 folks have. What are the major differences between marketing and publicity? So just on what you do day to day and the skills you need for the job.
I would say marketing is a lot more direct to the consumer. So we're the ones doing social advertising, stuff like that, whereas publicity is more interacting with like different news outlets, morning shows, and helping like plan the author tour and talking to bookstores. But there's a lot of collaboration as well. But I think the main thing is like if you are sending a book to an influencer, that's going to come from marketing. If you're sending a book to someone with a talk show, that's going to come from publicity. That's kind of the big divide.
The way I had it explained to me when I first started is the difference between marketing and publicity is marketing is paid media and publicity is earned media. So not everything marketing does has to do with money, but like they place the ads, they, you know, pay for XYZ for like fun boxes to send influencers. Media, publicity, like we don't pay for any of our reviews. Like that is all like you send a book to a reviewer, you email them about it, and you like hope that they like it enough to review it. And so it's just kind of different strategies about getting the word out.
Do you think that there are different skills necessitated by the two sides, or could someone with the same skills be successful on either side?
You can be successful on either side, but I will say this, and I think my cohorts here would agree, I would never be good at publicity. It is not where my skill set lies. It's a very different version of like hand-holding for an author too, whereas like I talk to them about like the book club kits and like the messaging and the creative and stuff like that, but I am not the one who like goes on tour with them when they like go. Like Jodi Picoult has someone who like goes with her to each event, as she should, but like I don't do that. I would never be good at that. And I'm not like a media person, so I'm much better talking to consumers directly, talking to book clubs, like chatting with them. It's still kind of the same thing where you're like talking to people, but it's two very different things. And I just know my place. I would have failed horribly trying to be a publicist.
Yeah, my sense with publicity is that you have to be a lot more organized and detail oriented, and that is not my skill set at all.
But on the flip side of that, I feel like at the core of both jobs, it's just like enthusiasm for books and figuring out messaging that's really going to resonate with people. It's just how you're communicating that messaging. So Colleen and Madison have like a better grasp on what this is super simplistic. I know this is more nuanced, but like what someone might be like excited to post on social media, or like how to get across to like the right influencers and like big name readers. Whereas like on publicity, I feel like you're trying to get like a pitch about like what's a really interesting like talking point that the author can speak to in an interview. So we talk a lot about how like our general messaging for the book, how we're framing it like cohesively, but then kind of figuring out different ways to like different means to the same end almost. And also like I'm not good at social media, so like I could not thrive in that area.
I would say too, in terms of getting into either field, I think you have to know like yourself and what your strengths are. Are you a person who like wants to craft messaging with an author? Are you a person who like wants to be BFFs with the producer of the Today Show? Like there's different things you kind of have to figure out for yourself, but I don't think you have to have like a marketing degree to go into marketing and book publishing. You don't have to have a PR degree to go into, you know, publicity. Our departments are full of so many interesting people with so many backgrounds. It's a lot of learning on the job. And so you don't have to like, I mean, at higher levels you might, but especially getting in at like the assistant, maybe associate level, you don't like have to have a specific skill set besides, you know, enthusiasm for the job and like being interested in the work. I think that that's the most important part.
And my job is slightly different, even though it's marketing. I'm talking, or not directly talking, but I'm communicating with readers, with the consumers. So I understand, you know, when something comes through from the author, and we also run newsletters for some of our authors. So, you know, those things happen, but my point of communication is always with the reader, what I think is my biggest strength. I would not do well in an environment where I had to interact with an author all the time. I would not do well in an environment where I had to interact with media folks all the time. I would constantly say the wrong thing. But with readers and consumers, I'm okay. I'm fine. I got it.
I definitely say the wrong thing all the time too, so don't worry.
I think that's a helpful distinction too, that marketing does work with consumers and readers, you know, and I think, I don't know if this is true generally, but I wonder what you all think. Like in my experience too, it was the marketing team that really created the sense of like how will this book be sold? Like what genre thing will go on it? Like the codes that kind of decide in what direction it will head. I know there's also sales, which is a separate thing, but I felt like marketing is also, it's really key in talking to like bookstores and people that are going to consume the books, correct?
Yeah, 100%. And I think kind of to Christine's point too, the way that you like they're going to pitch the book can be very different than how we are talking to about a book to consumers. So if there is a book about sisterhood is like the, you know, overarching theme, we can come up with like a fun tagline about like sisters and being different, but like the same and whatever. And Publicity won't necessarily ever touch that. Instead, they'll be like, this is the author that brought you X, Y, and Z, or she was inspired by to write the book because of the fight that she had with her sister. There's a different hook there. And for us, yeah, like Madison and I are going to be thinking about like this bookseller we know loves books that love blah, blah, blah. So let's craft it to talk about that. So I think it's a little different. I also think like, as much as I talk to my authors a lot, if it's a celebrity book, that's when marketing talks less to those authors. We talk to their teams, and Publicity is the people that are going to really get the chance to talk to them. So if that's like a piece of it that you love, like I am not talking to Priyanka Chopra directly, but like her publicist might get that chance. So I do think that's like another distinction that if you care about that, like that's going to be a difference for you.
That's helpful. It sounds like a lot of storytelling on both sides, but sort of a different kind of storytelling, perhaps. Okay, this is an extremely important question, and I cannot wait to hear what you all have to say, which is, this person says, I'd like to know what the panelists think of the TV show Younger and its very fictional representation of the publishing industry. Thank you.
I have a lot of thoughts on this, so thank you for your question. First of all, you cannot fake your age when you get a job. You have to give them your social security number. That is not possible. Secondly, you can't just give your friend a book deal just for fun, like she does with that guy who's the tattoo artist. At one point, she's like, if you do this, I'll give you like a $10,000 contract. That's not how it works. Also, there's like one agent in that whole show. That's the biggest thing that bothers me about it is like, there's a whole world of agencies in the publishing industry. Like every reputable author has an agent who is negotiating contracts, who's kind of working them through the whole process. And on that show, like you really don't see that. And I think that's kind of important to know because that's another side of publishing that people really don't know a lot about.
I'm obsessed with Younger, so I also thank you for your question because I miss it, and so I'm glad to be talking about it right now. I think the publishing industry is far less glamorous than they make it out to be. Assistants don't get to go to like book festivals and like stay in nice hotels. It's just not a thing that has ever happened in my life. I definitely don't dress as cute as Sutton Foster does either. We do have, I mean, like there's book launch parties and like there is some of that, but it's not nearly to the extent it's shown in the show. And I think that they also really merge marketing and publicity. And that might be true for some of like smaller publishing houses, but like there's not a book publicist in that show. It's all the marketing team, which kind of makes me upset, but that's okay. But it's a great show. I think they do have like publishing consultants. And so they actually kind of do get some of the things right. I'm always very impressed at like the lingo they use is some of the same things that we talk about. But it's definitely not like 100% true to what the true like publishing assistant experience is like in particular.
I will say it's my boss's absolute favorite show. She loves it. And I do think to Melissa's point, out of any show I've seen about publishing, that feels more like on point than anything else. But budgeting's always gonna like kill me. Like we're not spending $100,000 on almost any book ever. Like it's just not gonna happen. And I wear heels to the office because it makes me feel fancy and like an adult, but it's a lie. Like most people don't do that. So I think that's like some of the biggest stuff. It's like, you know, I also can't wear designer stuff. Like you're on a publishing salary. That's just not going to happen. But it's a lovely, like beautiful lie that they've created, if that makes anybody feel better.
I will say, like, I definitely partially got into this industry because of that show. Like, not gonna lie, I saw it and I was like wanting to learn a lot more about it. So in that sense, I feel like it's definitely I mean, people don't really know about the industry that much, and I do think it's given it a little bit more visibility that this is something that you can do as a job.
They're also, the timelines are all messed up in that show. They'll buy a book and be publishing it like a month later. That's just not how it happens. You're lucky if it's published within the next couple of years. And there is one thing, one bone I have to pick, is that Sutton Foster's character sells an excerpt to a magazine before they have bought the book, and that is not a thing you would ever be able to do, and it makes me so mad. And so thank you for giving me the time to talk about it. But I mean, the show is really amazing. It's fun to watch and kind of does get some things remarkably accurate. So I highly recommend to those who have not seen it.
For the record, I saw Sutton Foster at the gym once, and she benches like 100 pounds.
I 100% believe it. So what I'm hearing is watch younger if you want to get a true representation of what you guys do. Okay. No, but I do find it very interesting, the sort of intense dynamic between like an older white woman and a younger white woman who's her subordinate, and the sort of like intense dynamics that can happen within the field in terms of mentorship and all these interesting moments. Other questions that people want to put in the chat or in the Q&A, excuse me. Oh, here's one. This is for Aparna. They're asking about what specifically do you do with data? ?
Those might be things where if, we run lots of different newsletters, and it helps to know what resonates where well. So we have a science fiction and fantasy list where we know those books will do well, but I could try fitting something that might be a crossover, like literary fiction and science fiction, in that list and see how that performs. And by performs, I mean, maybe what's my open rate? How many people opened it? How many people clicked on it? What journey did they follow? Did they ended up purchasing that book? Did they not end up purchasing a book? Or I might include an excerpt in a book. We want to test out some, maybe it's a debut author, and so people don't know about it, but we want to put that in front of people and then see how the interest is. Or I'm kind of making this up, but if I see how many people clicked on a particular link, then I know, okay, that works well. And if that works well, maybe I can also try some of the other books that are similar. One of the fun things is that we're publishing new books all the time, so it's not like it's the same content that I'm running again and again. So it's not even the same book that I can go back and, give to people and sort of include in my newsletter and have it, perform exactly the same way. So I always have to look at similarities and genres, maybe that might work. I work with Colleen on her book club newsletter. So we, talk about on a very regular basis, like, okay, now this thing, we know that, this list likes historical fiction, but we also know that, mystery and suspense is a genre that if you like historical fiction, also making it up, there's a very high likelihood that you might also like mystery and suspense. So how about we try and merge those two, or how about we try offer mystery and suspense to these folks, to these subscribers, and see how that does. Or it might be literary fiction. So there are like any number of combinations you could look at, any number of, your data points essentially remain the same, but the data points, in a sense, what you consider to be the measurement changes every time, depending on what you're trying to get at. Am I trying to build this newsletter? Am I trying to build up a genre? Am I trying to create a new series where I want to increase my engagement? And does it work better if I include excerpts? Or does it work better if maybe I include a Q&A with an author? Or maybe have the editor talk about, a particular book that they worked on. So they can write a letter and then we can see what the response is to that. So those sorts of data points.
Very cool. Absolutely. So a kind of like it sounds like it's using a lot of skills of analysis that we might see in some other kinds of fields to apply to the exciting world of books and stories. Excellent. We do have a question asking about libraries. Who are the people that talk with libraries? Is that marketing ?
Yes, so we have a marketing library division. So it's a little different from children's to adults. If you wanted to be in children's publishing and focus on library, there's a library and education department. And we used to work much more like hand in hand with them, just because obviously like that's a main source there. So it was a little bit more in tandem. But for adult, I hate using the word adult. It makes it sound like it's like X-rated. For not children's fiction, there is a full like department that does library marketing, and they are lovely, and it's such an important part of how we sell books and why books continue to do well. So I don't have that much information about like how they got into it, but if anybody does, we have lovely contacts at our company that are great at what they do.
Awesome, very helpful. We love librarians as well. Well, I have one maybe perhaps additional question, which, oops, here's one more. Okay, this person says, do you have writers that connect with you directly, or is it all through agents? So perhaps, yeah, maybe a little sense of like how that process works.
I think it kind of depends on the writer. Yeah, it kind of depends on like what their relationship is. Some agents like to be more hands-on, but I definitely do a lot of just talking to the author, and then maybe I'll CC the agent just so they kind of know what's going on. I think as you kind of develop a relationship with the author, you might have more conversations just with them or just with you and the author and the editor.
Yeah. If it's a manuscript question though, we just as like FYI, our party line is we are not allowed to accept manuscripts without an agent representative. And that's to protect everyone. It's to protect the writers from feeling like they got screwed over. It's to protect us from, I get like 8 million emails a day being like, here's my manuscript from people all over the world. So that's just like, that's a party line for publishing in general, which is another kind of gatekeeping thing that they've been trying to figure out, like how do we kind of get around that, the agency part of it. But that way manuscripts come in through agents.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think we didn't get to touch on it, but the fictional representation of agents in television and movies is also delightful. Like Friends from College, there's like the agent is like playing inside basketball with this writer, and I'm like, that's not how my agent and I work, but okay. Yeah, agents are so important. We love them. Okay, yeah. I was just gonna ask, is there anything else that folks have about that you kind of like wished you had known before getting into this field, or any part of like what you love or are challenged by about this job that we didn't touch on yet?
Melissa looks like she was going to talk, but I was going to say, I think the one thing I would say is just get in. Like if you want to be in this world, the best thing you can do is just get your foot in the door, take whatever job you see and get, because I know 8 million people that started in one place and moved around to a different place and are doing something completely different than what they started out doing. It's harder to get in, but once you're in, you can do whatever, like you can move around, try different departments. So my suggestion would just be like, go for it, try it. You never know what you're gonna like. We all said that we wanted to be an editorial and none of us are. So you might end up liking it, or you can end up moving someplace else to someplace that's just a better fit.
And I would say something I wish I had known, like, is to really keep up with what's happening in the publishing world today, like in live time, books that are coming out now. Because I did a few interviews where they would ask me what my favorite books were. And I also was an English double major in college, so I'd read a lot of like Jane Austen, like old classics. And it's like, that's great. There's like a classics department, but like, I think it really goes far if you show you're super interested in like new developments in the industry, because there are changes pretty frequently. Like, for example, like the rise of celebrity book clubs, like that's kind of a new interesting thing, or like the latest authors being published now. That's kind of like a niche thing, but in hindsight, I'm like, I kind of messed that up in a lot of interviews because I was stuck in this like archaic idea of like what literature was when it was so much more than that.
I think if you're in college right now, any like internship experience you can get, you should be trying to look for it. I didn't get my first internship until after college, and then I did like that internships, and then I did 2 at the same time for like 6 months. So I didn't get my first job until like 6 or 7 months when I was, sorry, there's a lot of dogs in my house right now. 6 or 7 months outside of college, and it was a lot of like nannying while I was like trying to pay for my New York apartment. So any kind of experience you can get right now while you're in school, I think is great.
And internships, do you mean like any kind of anything that would like be related to this field, or do you feel like it has to be like specifically in publishing?
I think if it's even tangentially related, like I help with like editing resumes and stuff, and I see a lot of people who have worked on like their college newspaper, anything that's like translating to, and to me, I'm like, oh, that could be great if you're in publicity. You know, I did a lot of marketing with like college papers when I was in school that I could put on my resume and say that this is something that I was involved in. Like I knew how to run ads on Facebook. Anything that you can be getting experience while you're able to, while you're still in school, I think is great.
I want to say too, internships are awesome, but I also know a lot of people that got into the industry without them. And so if you're not in college right now and you're like, oh my God, do I need to have an internship? They're awesome. Getting experience is fabulous, but it's also not the end all be all. And another thing that I kind of was worried about when I was starting was like the stability of the industry. I think a lot of people were like, oh, books are dead. Ugh. But as we've seen, like the book industry is really resilient and new things come about. Like it was ebooks a few years ago, audiobooks are so huge now, but like print is still beloved and still does well. And if you want to work in publishing, don't let anybody tell you that it's not worth your while, because it's really fulfilling. And if that's the job that you want to do, then you should do it.
And honestly, probably the most stable industry in the world, actually. Like, it's never dying. It may change, but it's never going to die. And the one thing I know about my job is I'm going to have my job. Like, it's always going to be here.
Yeah, and you don't need publishing industry, like at least in my case and a few other cases that I've seen, you don't have to have publishing background to be able to get into publishing. You can have a similar experience so long as you're able to relate that in your cover letter or in your resume, that here's X that I learned outside, here's how I can apply it to this job description. So long as you're able to kind of relay that, that still gives you a pretty good chance. I didn't come from publishing when I got in. I did all sorts of things, so.
That's really helpful. Thank you, yeah. Cool. Well, I feel like this is basically all the time we have. Such good questions, such good answers. I'll linger here for a few moments if anyone wants to like make a note of anything that's in the chat. We have been providing, you know, it's not very sophisticated, but based on all folks who expressed interest in our first meeting about this series, a few updates to a document that is basically just like, here are entry-level publishing jobs that we're seeing and opportunities that are available for fellowships or mentorships in publishing online that are open to remote applicants. So if you want to get on that mailing list, perhaps just shoot us an email at info@bluestoop.org, and we've also been putting it in our newsletter, which you can sign up for on our website, which is just bluestoop.org. One little question. Folks just say thank you so much, and I would echo that. Thank you all so much for taking the time. This was such a joy. I learned so much. Publicists and marketing folks are truly the unsung, well, often sung, but also unsung heroes of the world. So thank you all so much. And yeah, come back next time in 2 weeks for our special session about art and production, also folks that are extremely important in the process of getting books out. So thank you all so much.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you.
you.
Good evening.